Jones cuts it north-south. Touchdown, Bears.
Welcome to Sikkim 365 Radio.
Here's Buckner. Pressure coming. Buckner stands in and fires his balls. Intercepted. Gilmore down the sideline. Pick six. Gilmore.
Sikkim 365 Radio is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Pistol formation for Miami. Hand off up the middle to Parrish. Parrish gets in the end zone for a touchdown. The second touchdown for Miami, the second on the ground, and they take a 10-point lead against the Wildcats.
Sikkim 365 Radio is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Walker throws, end zone, touchdown! Cedric Tillman just bodied up, established position, and it dropped right into his lap with Devonshire in coverage.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
Texas Tech has to go to NC State next week. This is the ball game right here. Smith finds an open man. Can he get there? Yes. Yes, he can.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
And here we go. Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. And don't forget tonight, 10:30 on the CW channel. Sports Tonight with a condensed version of what we do every day with the highlighted segments or discussion or topics that will be on tonight at 10:30. Paul Catalina to my left, Craig Smoak to my right. I'm David Smoak. In the studio, Emery, Levi, Jacob, and Garrett. Jack is editing post BYU and Baylor video for the website and so much more. So last week we had some bangers, we had some stunners, we had all sorts of things college football. You look at this week's schedule, the banger factor is almost none. I'm looking up and down the top 25 schedule, and I don't know if there's a game. Brigham Young, Oregon is a game in Eugene, 12 versus 25. But other than that, I don't see off the top of the schedule going down the list of any other game. Miami A&M should not be ranked. That's a banger game. And one of those teams is coming off a devastating, demoralizing loss, A&M at home to Appalachian State.
Who was a banger game outside of Alabama and Texas last week? Tennessee and Pitt?
Yeah, two top 25 teams.
Baylor and BYU.
Baylor, Brigham Young. Yeah.
Go on.
So
yeah, Houston and Tech wound up being a good game, but
not.
I think there was a lot of games that ended up being good games that weren't expected to be good
Yeah.
games necessarily, and so I think that's kind of what you're looking for this weekend, or at least that's the hope, because the way Week 1 started off, it was hard to imagine that there was going to be a very good follow-up to that, given that there was a lesser schedule on paper, so to speak. And I don't know, do y'all think, guys, Week 2 lived up to Week 1? You think it was a nice follow-up?
there was some good games.
I felt like there's a hell of a lot of good games. I thought there was multiple upsets, the whole Sun Belt thing, like the Baylor BYU game.
It's a different type of weekend, yeah.
Well, I mean, when you have a whole spread of different teams and different styles and all that, like, yeah, it's going to be different from time to time. But I felt like Week 2 was pretty damn exciting. Like, I don't know, maybe it was just me that thought that, but it was pretty good from start to finish. So, yeah, Week 3, I mean, we're going to get some clunkers, but maybe this is the one, but, I kind of thought that way about Week 2 and was pleasantly surprised. So hopefully that's the case again this weekend.
Steve Shook, who watches us quite a bit, he's from Ohio. He told me that Miami of Ohio and Cincinnati are playing the 126th meeting between those two schools. And I think they're playing in Cincinnati at the Bengal Stadium, whatever it's called. Yeah, so Miami and A&M, looking forward to that. Might be interesting to see how A&M bounces back. Can Miami remain unbeaten? They're 2-0 already. They have Nebraska, Oklahoma, which basically doesn't mean much other than tradition because one team is a shell of itself and has been for about 20 years.
I mean, Oklahoma, Nebraska, I think, has got tons of storylines. Like, I mean, we can't have Georgia, Bama as far as, opponents go. I mean, we don't know a whole lot about Oklahoma at this point. I mean, this is the best team they've played. Nebraska, first game with an interim head coach, Mickey Joseph, after the whole Scott Frost debacle. Conference play is about to start, so everybody's in their final tune-up. So I think this is it's in Lincoln. Right after they fire Scott Frost. So I don't know. I think that game's actually kind of interesting. Georgia, South Carolina, I mean, you got SEC play at least going on.
BYU against that defense.
Yeah, BYU and Oregon, Penn State and Auburn. I mean, that's a game where does Brian Harsin make it out of Auburn, Alabama, alive if they lose to Auburn or to Penn State at home, even though Penn State's a top 25 team. So those are, a couple. Texas Tech on the road at NC State. I mean, is Tech really going to go and start 3-0 with that tough schedule that they had? Michigan State and Washington.
Texas Tech will be top 25 if they win that game.
Michigan State and Washington. Michael Penix has completely pumped new life into the Huskies, and so they get to sit here and play host to number 11 Michigan State. Gary Bohannon has to go play at Florida. I mean, I'm not excited about that game as a whole. The Gators will probably mop up the Bulls, but I'm interested to see that for him. UTSA and Texas, Miami and A&M. I don't know. I think there's going to be some interesting games this weekend.
All right.
The Gators much smarter about when they scheduled that game against USF than when Florida State let USF come into their place and beat them and essentially get Bobby Bowden fired.
Here are some numbers, graphics that were released today. The first one is College Game Day on ESPN. Off to their their best 2-week start in 12 years. Through 2 weeks, 2.1 million average viewers, up 19% from last year. And the final hour, right before Texas and Alabama kicked off, 2.7 million average viewers, a 66% higher number than the competition. The competition is Fox in their game day show.
It's ESPN's taken a lot of lumps, and rightfully so, recently, but Game Day, the first one, is always going to be a big deal, and so they're going to get that. But to carry their numbers over the second week, adding in Pat McAfee, a now beloved media figure, as where Fox in their second week added back in Urban Meyer, really kind of shows you, all right, well, they're going to add in Urban Meyer. Maybe people will tune in to watch that, but adding Urban Meyer is hoping to get viewers. Now, the guy's going to be able to break down tape and say a lot of things and talk football, but he's your creepy uncle at this point, and Fox has added him back, and now, creepy uncle or fun older brother, that's what Pat McAfee is. The 40-year-old guy who can still, go toe-to-toe with all these college kids. That's a much better thing, especially since it's a college show. You will watch it less, when you're out of college because it probably doesn't hit the same way. But adding in Pat McAfee, probably the most beloved sports talk show host for college kids, brilliant by ESPN.
Yeah, and their numbers show it. Now, here are a couple other notes. The Alabama-Texas game. This number here, viewers watched the Texas and Alabama game. It's the most watched college football game this year. Of course, we're just 2 or 3 weeks into the season. That's a combination of streaming and TV eyeballs. That's a monstrous number. And regular season, college football or NFL in Fox history. And so, again, that's combined the TV sets and also the streamers. And then this one Saturday night, Baylor and Brigham Young. This is great news. Baylor-Brigham Young game Saturday night was ESPN's best late-night game in 6 years with the 2.4 million viewers in a game that kicked off just after 9, and a game that you wonder if that does make those who look ahead towards the television contracts and, of course, Pac-12 after dark, and will that opening be available or what? Then you have Brigham Young and Baylor put up a nice number as well.
I defer to my onset brother, Craig Smoak, here on this one about, the Pac-12's the only one who can have good games at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that got a little too pumped up during the whole debate about the Pac-12 and the Big 12, simply because there's a way around the Pac-12's dominance in that slot. It's put teams against them, put better matchups on, and with BYU coming into the conference, they're looking around the room and there's not a lot of bunk mates. There's nobody that's within reach. But if you add a couple of teams out there and you have a cycle of teams going out to Provo, I think it's proven to be a hell of a place to have to go play a football game. And that looks like a game that if you have to play a late Saturday night in Provo, that's almost one of those that you mark on the schedule when it gets released of like, oh, man, this is when we got to go to Provo on a late Saturday night, and then who do we play right after that? You know, like when schedules come out and you see what the little ups and downs of it are, that's in the new Big 12 going to be one. It's like who plays late Saturday night at BYU and who do they play right after that? Do they have an off week? Who do they play? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's going to be an interesting schedule quirk. But, yeah, they can certainly fit a handful of those games and, you know, make an interesting Saturday night matchup. And then if you were to, let's say, potentially add another school or two out there, I see no reason why you can't, you know, have games. Now, I will say that was, you know, it's one thing to get home on a Saturday night after a long day at McLean when they have like an evening game, let's say, and post-game and all that gets over with, and you get home and you're like, man, the late night games or the last primetime games are winding down or whatever. You're like, what's left? And it's Pac-12 After Dark, and it's just kind of on in the background because I don't really root for Oregon State or Stanford or whatever. But, man, when you're actually invested in the game going on at like 1 o'clock in the morning, It is tough. That is going to take some getting used to for folks in the Central Time Zone because that was not only a stressful game just watching it and how physical it was, but it started to creep past midnight. My eyes started getting heavy, and I'm a night owl, but that was hard to stay peppy for. But, man, glad to see they got a good number, and I think that bodes well for potentially what they can do in the future.
You want to make you feel old. We in the studio, you guys can't see it, but we have a screen, a monitor that stays up all the time with all the different cameras that are on us. Well, I was sitting on the couch in here watching that game in the second half, and as it got to about 12:30, I was nodding off, and I caught myself on the camera ha!
Oh, yeah. I stayed up for it and then had an early tea time. That was dumb, but
Considering though that some of the numbers that Pac-12 folks were pointing to is look they got 1 million viewers. 1 million viewers. That's 2.4. Okay. I'm sure the top 25 rankings played into that, but I also think it's just that these two fan bases, people know they're going to get a good football game, and it's brewing a little bit as far as a rivalry goes. So I think there's some potential there and potential in that window. But, yeah, well done to BYU and Baylor. Good to know that a couple million-plus people stayed up that late to watch the end of that game.
I was listening to part of Nick Saban's not post-game, but what he did yesterday, talking and looking ahead to their next game and obviously looking back at Texas. And one of the things he said, which is an incredible compliment to a fan base in Texas that has been compared to, at times, kind of a laid-back wine and cheese crowd. That doesn't mean that's true, but there has been that at times thought. 105,000 plus, their biggest, most attended game ever at DK Royal Memorial Stadium. It should have been two massive names, two massive traditions, two massive logos, and still some excitement, and the fact that they're going to start being in the same conference very soon. And Alabama and Texas put up massive numbers, and that's great. That's great for going forward, and it is a monster number. And the Baylor Brigham Young number, 2.4 million late, considering that game went past midnight. I think it was 109 or whenever it is that it ended. I can't remember. That's obviously a very big deal.